Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with the daily update for March 17th, 2021. Let me begin by wishing everyone a happy St. Patrick's Day. What we're going to talk about today is the growing strategic tensions between especially the Western world and Russia and China. And these tensions are increasing as we're about to have a Schiller Institute conference to take up the theme of how to overcome these tensions and actually establish relations of peaceful cooperation. The conference will be this Saturday and Sunday, the 20th and 21st of March, under the title World at a Crossroads, 2 months into the Biden administration. And I'll go through a little bit more on that in a moment. But let's just look at the setting. Now, first, we have the release yesterday of the United Kingdom's Defense Review, Global Britain in a Competitive Age. Global Britain is the name that's been given to Boris Johnson's revising of the British Empire. And what's clear is that there's no real revision to it. It's an escalation of the same geopolitical doctrine, which has put us on the edge of war. In their document, China is called the biggest state-based threat and systemic challenge. And they commit themselves to deployments in the Pacific. The British military will be sending troops on some level to the Pacific to back up the U.S. as part of the special relationship. At the same time, they label Russia an acute threat to our security. And they say we must actively deter and defend against the full spectrum of threats from Russia. What are those threats? That they're going to poison people, that we're going to continue to have the false flag and lies of Porton Down and British intelligence claiming that Russia is involved in poisoning people all over the world, or that the Russians intervened on the Brexit vote. Well, that's essentially what this boils down to. Now then you have NATO, and Stoltenberg, the General Secretary of NATO, is continuing his push to argue that NATO has to be more involved in a global role against the malign behavior of Russia and China. Part of this is a series of military exercises under the title Defender Europe 21. And listen to the titles of these. These include one called Swift Response, coming in May, which will include Estonia, Bulgaria, and Romania. This is obviously part of the eastward drive of NATO against the alleged threat coming from Russia. The next one is called Immediate Response, which will go through June, involving 8 countries. Then there's the African Lion, you can imagine what that is. And then Steadfast Defender, which is reinforcing the transatlantic alliance. And so they're talking about deploying troops eastward, not just eastward to the border of Russia, but now into the Indo-Pacific, which is the old British stomping grounds of the East of Suez deployment strategy, which comes from the traditions of British geopolitics. And remember, geopolitics is the doctrine that got us into 2 world wars in the 20th century, as well as the long Cold War, and now is pushing us into a new Cold War that could become a hot war, which these military deployments are designed supposedly to counter. Then you have the U.S. side of things, and there's a new intelligence report out which says that Russia did intervene in the 2020 election on behalf of Donald Trump. Now, this is the same rewarmed argument of the whole of Russiagate. Putin, of course, denied it. There's no evidence it's presented. At the same time, they say China did not intervene, but essentially this is a continuation of the anti-Russian hysteria which we saw from the intelligence community that was designed to prevent Donald Trump from achieving a strategic cooperative agreement with Russia's President Putin. Today, or we have over the last couple of days, a tour of top U.S. officials in Asia. Yesterday, Secretary of State Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met with Japanese officials, and they discussed the shared values of the U.S. and Japan. And what is the most important of these? Anti-China policy. They say China is a problem where its behavior is, quote, inconsistent with the existing international order, unquote. Well, where is China's behavior inconsistent with the international order? Maybe they mean that because China is not launching wars all over the world, the way the US and its allies have done under especially Bush and Obama, that that's inconsistent with the world order. The argument that they're violating the rules-based order is based on rules that were made by the globalist agreements on trade and the military strategic deployments that have launched regime change wars all over the world. Well, China's behavior is inconsistent with that. And yet the idea that we must maintain a vigilance against the malign behavior of China is the theme of Austin and Blinken on these meetings. Austin himself said we must maintain a competitive edge over China, and there have been a number of military officials who have talked about how we've lost that edge, that China could defeat us and is defeating us in war games, and therefore we have to build up our military capability. The same is true of the UK Defense Review, where they're calling for an increase in strategic nuclear weapons to be deployed to deal with the non-existent threat. Now, Blinken and Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor to Joe Biden, will be meeting with Chinese officials in Alaska on Thursday. They have repeatedly attempted to downplay these meetings, saying it's a one-off meeting, we just want to get to know them so we can make assessments. But this could be the beginning of something, and so we'll wait and see what happens with that. Now, it's in this context that the Schiller Institute is sponsoring its conference this weekend, March 20th and 21st. You can register for it. It's an online conference. Register at theschillerinstitute.com. The title, The World at a Crossroad. And let me just give you the panel so you get a sense of what we're going to be doing and who's participating. The first panel is going to be on culture, reversing the cultural wasteland, the urgency of a new renaissance, creating a planetary culture worthy of the dignity of humanity. This is addressing the whole deterioration of the real Western values, where we're seeing depopulation, the breakdown of the family, the replacement of education with entertainment, with social media replacing reading and thinking, the destruction of drama, the reality television replacing real drama, Shakespearean tragedy, and so on. This will include a keynote from the Schiller Institute founder, Helga Zepp-LaRouche, on why poetry and music must supersede partisanship. There'll be a presentation on Dante's Commedia, as we're coming up with an anniversary of Dante's death. We'll have discussion of Beethoven, how to address the crisis in education, and some musical examples and a question and answer session. So that's the first panel, which begins at 10 a.m. Saturday morning, or 3 p.m. in Europe. The second panel is titled The Strategic Crisis Facing the Human Race. Again, we'll have an initial keynote from Helga Zepp-LaRouche, and then we'll have speakers representing China, Russia, Syria, a very significant U.S. official, and then representatives from various states of South America and Central America, also from Pakistan. And the final presentation will be on the Great Reset. What does this mean? What's the intent? And why is this the great leap backward? And that will begin right after the first panel, a short break before it. The third panel, which is the first one on Sunday, is titled The Indo-Pacific, the Caucasus, Eastern Europe, and Southwest Asia, Pivots for War or Peaceful Development with the New Silk Road. We'll have a significant presentation from Hussein Askari, who's the Southwest Asia director of the Schiller Institute, who's been very much involved in discussions between countries in that region and China. We'll have an official from Yemen. We'll have other representatives from the Middle Eastern countries. And the final presentation will be from Jacques Cheminade, the leader of the Schiller Institute in France. So that should be a very significant follow-up to the strategic panel, which is the second one on Saturday. And finally, the last panel on Sunday. By the way, the first panel on Sunday begins at 10 a.m. or again at 3 p.m. Pacific time. Now, the final panel on Sunday is titled The Challenge of Famine and Pandemics, the Coincidence of Opposites, which means achieving a higher concord above the profile disagreements, or mass extinction. And it will include a discussion of how U.S. agriculture can be deployed to end the danger of famine stalking many parts of the world, a mission for our youth, and what needs to be done to build a world health system that can protect against not just the current pandemic, but future pandemics. So this is a critical conference coming again, as I pointed out, at a moment where we're seeing a drive to push the new administration in the direction of the Obama and Bush administrations of provocation, of false flags, of regime change war, of escalation against Russia and China? Or can we move it and move the United States into cooperation with Russia and China and India, as Lyndon LaRouche had proposed with his four-power agreement? So this Sunday, Saturday and Sunday, the 20th and 21st, go to schillerinstitute.com to register for the conference, and I hope many of you will be joining us then. I'll be back tomorrow with another update, so be sure to share this and organize your friends and collaborators to participate in this globally historic conference. Thanks, and I'll see you tomorrow.